Hello, I'm Don Mitchell. Thanks for joining me again for another lesson from Disciple, the book that contains 60 lessons to help you draw closer to God, understand Him more fully, and to live the life that He has called you to since before the world was created. Today we'll be talking more about part one, knowing God more fully, in from week 4 of the first lessons for days 1 and 2. Think about and learn from those who are most like Jesus. So let me begin by reading from Matthew, book 25, verses 33 through 36 in the New King James Version. And he will set the sheep on his right hand, but the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on his right hand, "Come, you blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom, prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me." Jesus made it clear that we are to be active in sharing the gospel with non-believers, teaching believers to become disciples. Matthew 28, 19, and 20, the New King James Version talks about that, and providing for those who most need our assistance, as described in Matthew 25, 33 through 36, which I've just read, for believers, and Luke 10, 25 through 37, the New King James Version, for all others. By being quite aware of how much greater Jesus, the Son of God, is than we are, it's easy to think of what he asks us to do as being beyond what we can accomplish. However, if we carefully note what Jesus commanded and taught in these verses, we can see that demands are not as great as they might first seem. In terms of the Great Commission, Matthew 28, 19, and 20, we should appreciate that until we know the gospel, we aren't going to gain salvation. Clearly, the good news of the gospel brings to us in gaining new believers, gain salvation rather, should be something that we would want to joyfully share with others. For those who are new believers, great hunger and thirst for godly knowledge are common. If we simply show up and try to help such a new believer, we should be able to help her or him become more fruitful as a disciple. In Matthew 25, 33 through 36, and Luke 10, 25 through 37, we can see that we aren't expected to feed someone every meal for the rest of his or her life. Instead, we are to feed someone when she or he is hungry, or cannot take care of him or herself. Why wouldn't we do that? I find it hard to imagine that anyone who wasn't dying of thirst and had some healthy liquid to share wouldn't provide some of it to a thirsty person. If, for example, we see someone who is new and looking a little befuddled enter our church, why wouldn't we give some directions, provide a meal, and possibly extend some ongoing hospitality? Anyone who is naked clearly needs clothes. Few would be unwilling to provide such coverings. While most of us aren't physicians or nurses, we can clearly visit someone who's ill and provide whatever support and comfort our company, words, and prayers can bring. Those in prison cannot leave, obviously, so we need to visit them before we can help them in whatever ways God wants. In sum, the tasks mentioned in Matthew 25, 33 through 36 aren't all that demanding, except that we must be prepared to put someone else's needs ahead of our own desires in the particular moment. Doing so is good for us, when the result is to become less selfish. Well, the parable of the Good Samaritan, as found in Luke 10, 25 through 37, clearly describes greater burdens in providing help. Those burdens are simply commensurate with the degree of the needs of the naked, half-dead traveler in the parable who has been robbed. If you ask most believers, they will indicate they haven't yet done all of the things that Matthew 25, 33 through 36 includes. If encouraged to do so, some people would probably say they probably won't ever do at least a few of such things, perhaps such as not visiting anyone in prison. Yet when he said these things, Jesus knew that all of these actions are good for us, as well as for those who are the obvious beneficiaries. How can we come to fully appreciate this perspective? In many cases, finding those who happily and enthusiastically perform each of these activities can help us to notice the benefits for us in God's plan of service. Rather than seeking a remarkable person who might overwhelm us with her or his righteousness and looking for such information, we can potentially learn more by speaking with a number of seemingly ordinary believers who are engaged in such activities. If we ask these people to tell us about the experience of serving in these ways, we are likely to hear about experiences that we can imagine doing, ones that can help us develop godly desires to do likewise. In time, our fruitfulness will then grow after we follow Jesus' guidance and the experiences of others in these regards. So let's now talk more about ways that we can experience God more fully by thinking about and learning from those who are most like Jesus. Chances are you haven't thought much about this topic. You may need to schedule some additional quiet time to do so, about how you can serve as a source for your additional learning. Pray for God's directions through gaining the help of the Holy Spirit. Acting on this lesson will clearly take you longer than 2 days, so keep at it. Hopefully, the following questions will help you focus your attention as you do. 1. Who are some ordinary believers who joyfully and actively share the gospel, helping believers to become better disciples of Jesus? Feeding the hungry, providing for the thirsty, taking in strangers, clothing those who need garments, and visiting the sick and those who are incarcerated. 2. Who else can you add to the list of those you know or have heard of or read about? How can you learn more from as many of these believers as possible about why they do what they do, how they do it, and what the effects have been on their lives? 4. How can you get help in learning how to experience the same effects? 5. How can you perform each activity before this course ends? 6. Who can you speak with today or tomorrow to begin your learning? And 7. Can someone who is already doing so join with you during the first time you serve in one of these new ways? Now let me just read you what our week 4 memory verse is so that you can begin working on that. This is from the Beatitudes, Matthew 5:44 through 45 in the New King James Version. Love your enemies. Bless those who curse you. Do good to those who hate you. And pray for those who spitefully use and persecute you, that you may be sons of your Father in heaven.